Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. Just got a good donation from a gentleman who has now become all of your benefactor, and he sends the question, what recommendations do you, Mr. Cropper, have for implementing ethics, books about it, or so on? I do have a couple of things to say about this. Implementing ethics is a different problem from thinking about them. Slightly. Just slightly, though. Aristotle has something, and I can't find it now. It's fine, because I did find a good quote that I was looking for, but one of the things he says, I can't find the direct quote, is that a person who went to a philosopher and talked to him about philosophy, and then went away and didn't change his life in any way, would be a lot like a person who went to a doctor and talked to the doctor about medicine and health, and then went away and didn't change his actions in life at all. So a philosopher should be directly related to how you act, what you do, the choices you make. As a doctor, and his discourse is directly related to your life in reality. And as if you go talk to a banker, and the banker says interest rates are going way up or they're going way down, that's going to affect whether you borrow or buy or sell, or what it's going to, you know, or is the stock market going up and down, prices. And the banker's got things to say that are going to make you change what you were doing in reality. You're not going to do as much as this and more of that, or whichever. Philosophy has to be the same thing, or else we wouldn't say that it's useful. We would say it's useless, right? And then what use would it be? Philosophy has to affect what you do in everyday life, your conclusions. So says Aristotle. Now, I want to... before we go into this next thought and spend so much time on Aristotle, I would recommend Philosophy Who Needs It, obviously, by Ayn Rand. That's a good one for implementing it in your life, because the question is, how do I implement it? Well, you've already answered the fact that you need it. But she goes through the case of why you need it. Now, if you go through the case in detail of why it is you need it, then you'll see all kinds of places to implement it. So I would start with Philosophy Who Needs It by Ayn Rand, but which is a series of essays, and I don't think all of them are by her in that particular volume. I am like an amputee with no arms or legs without my library. I could just grab it off the shelf and see if there are any other essays. But Philosophy Who Needs It I'd start with, and then go to Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. His first 3 or 4 chapters aren't directly relevant, always horns honking, not always completely relevant to implementation of ethics, the first 3-4 chapters. But chapters, I believe it's like 6, 7, and 8 are chapters on ethics, happiness, things like this. Those ones are absolutely relevant to implementing ethics, not just theorizing about them, but what does it mean to you? What do you have to do every single day in every single way if you want to be ethical in this way? So I would start there, and then I would go, if you've conquered what Ayn Rand can give you, and you've gone over Peikoff's OPAR, Objectivism and Philosophy of Ayn Rand, then you've got to go to Aristotle. Then you've got to go to, as they would say, the root. Now, there might be stops along the way. Who is it, Kierkegaard? No. It's not Kierkegaard. I always get him mixed up with the other one. Soren Kierkegaard. There's another one who tried to do a rational ethics. Spinoza. It had to be Spinoza. Tried to give a rational justification for a rational self-interest, for self-interestedness, for ethics of reason. Well, that's not going to do you as much good, I don't think, as going to Aristotle, who was fantastic in this field. And from the Nicomachean Ethics, Book 2, Chapter 4, he says that we call a man just and temperate when they do just and temperate things. And we say that it is by doing these things that the just man is produced, and by doing temperate acts that the temperate man is produced. Now here's the key. Without doing these, no one would have even a prospect of becoming good. Without doing the things that we call good, you wouldn't be able to become good. Okay? Fine, if that's not profound yet, let's ring it through one or two more times. Now, if you put down a list of the virtues that you're thinking of practicing, one of them might be long-term planning, which you may or may not be aware is you have to list it right at the top of important virtues when you're talking about virtues for human life, because human life is the standard. What makes it better? Long-term planning. There you go. I mean, that was a short process, wasn't it? Long-term planning is a virtue. You have to use rationality to plan long-term. You have to have happiness as your goal. You have to have your own self-interest as your driving motive. True, but once you have all those values down and you want to now begin sort of saying, how do I sort of change my life from the way I live right now into living for the purpose of these values and virtues? Because in a sort of rationalistic way, because you don't have a direct absolute evidence for it, in a rationalistic way you know these values must lead to happiness and contentment and satisfaction. You know that, even though you haven't yet practiced them. Now this is not, as David Hume would say, he would say that that's faith. You just have faith because you have no reason to believe it because you haven't seen it occur. But there can be belief in things that is not faith. Belief in things that you haven't even seen. Like, I believe the sun's going to come up tomorrow. I don't have any faith in that. I actually have profound reason to believe that. Lots of reasons, like it came up yesterday and the day before. And there's what reason would there be to stop, and so on. You've decided that virtue is important. Now you want to start implementing, like long-term planning. You've got to try it, says Aristotle. Or like honesty. When you're just going to tell a little white lie, you know, why didn't you come to the family barbecue the other night? You could say, I was watching SpongeBob SquarePants. But instead you say, you people are so boring, I didn't care for your company, I couldn't bring myself. You know, try honesty once in a while. Poke somebody in the eye with honesty. Now, you've never put a list of virtues together and come up with politeness and being nice, and you've never put those on a list of virtues. I know that because if a Nazi were coming at you, you wouldn't practice those virtues. They wouldn't. What the hell is a virtue that doesn't do you any good in reality? What is the virtue of being nice to people with disregard for those people's beliefs and views? That's not a virtue. That is a vice on your part. If you're nice to people who you completely disagree with, this is... I'm not saying you have to attack them and hit them in the head and stuff, but you don't have to bend over backwards to say things like, well, that's your opinion and we can both do that. So try practicing, instead of the virtue of niceness and manners or whatever, which isn't a virtue, as we've just seen, try practicing the virtue of honesty. Try practicing the virtue of long-term. Try practicing the virtue of seeking your own happiness instead of sacrificing it to others, like, for example, when somebody wants you to go to a movie. So I don't like going to the movie. You can't get up and pause the movie and go get a beer. You can't get a beer anyways. You can't bring beer in to the movie theater. We have to buy our drinks there. It's expensive. Why not just rent a flick at home? We can watch it over again if we like it. We can pause it. There won't be geeks sitting, you know, around us making noise or whatever. But you just say, well, you know, that's the thing to do. So you go to a movie with somebody. And you sit there and you feel guilty. You think, what could I have been doing besides? Practice the virtue of actually deciding to do what you think is better for you, rather than doing what everybody around you wants you to do or whatever. You know that your friends that you hang out with are morons or whatever. Practice the virtue of hanging out with them less. You don't have to say goodbye to all of them immediately. I've done that to quite a few friends in my life. Just said, you know, don't talk to me anymore. That's it. I'm done with you. Shut up and never talk to me. If you have occasion to do that, that's nice. But for you. But at any rate, try to practice the virtue of cutting down on people's company you don't enjoy. Try to, as Aristotle says, do these good things to become good. That's the advice ultimately I think I have about implementing virtues. To read about it, Aristotle. Listen